As a child model who'd tasted early fame, I was forced by my mother into a world of depravity. For a hefty sum, she pushed me into the abyss of explicit photography, shattering my promising future. At school, I became a target, ridiculed and bullied mercilessly. The torment drove me to take my own life in the school's bathroom. And then, I awoke, back at the very beginning, the day I was first coerced into that horrifying ordeal. 1. I was jolted awake by a sharp pain across my face. What? I muttered, confused. I'm dead, aren't I? Can't I just be at peace? Slowly, I opened my eyes. The harsh light and the cacophony of voices were jarring. This wasn't the dimly lit bathroom at school. What are you staring at? I told you to change your clothes. My mother's voice pierced through the noise. In her hand was a pile of familiar rags. I'm already dead, yet I can't escape this demon? Ever since I was discovered by a scout at the age of 5 and became a child model, my life had been a relentless cycle of photo shoots. Sleep deprivation was my constant companion. Often, I would collapse from exhaustion during late-night shoots, my heart pounding painfully. My mother would simply douse me with cold water and urge me to continue. I had become her cash cow, while she counted money until her fingers ached and flaunted designer bags. I lived a meager existence, barely affording a decent meal. Every day after school, the first thing I had to do was practice my catwalk. Since I was little, my mother had forced me to wear high heels, leaving my legs bruised and sore. As a child, I had tried to get out of it with childish pleas, but all I got in return was a beating. She would always say I wasn't trying hard enough, and I would watch my peers enjoying themselves at amusement parks. Filled with envy, I was often forced to practice until late into the night before I was allowed to do my homework. The click-clack of my high heels against the floor would sometimes annoy the neighbors, but my mother would always defend me with a fiery tongue. What's wrong with my daughter practicing her catwalk? She would sneer. What if she becomes a supermodel? Can you afford to take responsibility for that? I think you're just jealous. Helpless, the neighbors would simply call her a crazy woman behind her back. Because of her obsession, my grades plummeted. When my teachers called to express their concerns about my lack of focus, she would pretend to be cooperative while secretly scoffing at them. She would say that they were jealous of my talent and encourage me to keep practicing. What's the point of studying? She would say, you'll just end up working for someone else. Just listen to your mother. I've already planned everything out for you. At 5, you'll start modeling. By 10, you'll be at the top of the industry. And by 15, you'll be walking the international runways. My daughter is going to be a supermodel. She would daydream about this bright future, more excited than I was. I would bury myself in my homework, trying to ignore her, but she couldn't stand my defiance. She would snatch my notebook and tear it to shreds. When I cried and begged her, saying I would get in trouble at school for not having my homework, she would just scoff. What's the point of doing homework? You're so stupid. You can't even think of an excuse? She would sneer. If the teacher asks, just say you forgot it. How could I have such a stupid daughter? She was a master manipulator, and my father couldn't take it anymore. He had left her long ago. I was too young at the time, and the court had awarded custody to my mother. If I had a choice, I would have much rather lived with my weak father. 2. Hurry up. Will you? The photographer is waiting. There are plenty of others who would jump at the chance. If you don't want to do it, just get lost. Someone was urging us from outside the dressing room. My mother flashed a fawning smile at the person. After all, the pay for this shoot was quite generous. If it weren't for my small amount of fame in the child modeling industry, this opportunity wouldn't have come my way. My mother was pinning her hopes on this, short-sightedly believing that a high-paying job would boost my career. She didn't realize that once you take off your clothes, it's hard to put them back on. Give me 5 minutes. Okay, I'll figure something out. I'll make her wear it, she said, giving me a vicious glare before turning back to the photographer's assistant with a forced smile. She's so cruel to me, but so accommodating to others. I never thought I'd be given a second chance like this. In my previous life, I had been so conditioned by my mother that I had stopped resisting her. I had obediently put on the clothes and posed for the photos. The photographer had made some very suggestive and inappropriate advances during the shoot. I had told my mother, but it was useless. If the photographer had asked, I have no doubt she would have handed me over to him. The outfit for this shoot was particularly revealing. It was a bikini, barely covering anything. It was hard to believe that such a skimpy outfit was designed for a child. I couldn't understand why anyone would design clothes like that, or who would buy them for their children. It was after this photo shoot that my life took a turn for the worse. I was mercilessly bullied online. People were outraged by the revealing clothing, and there was a huge debate about the sexualization of children. The photos made their way to my school, and I became the target of everyone's ridicule. People called me names, avoided me like the plague, and even my teachers treated me with disgust. They were afraid of getting contaminated by touching my things. A group of boys cornered me in an alleyway, groped me, and asked me how much I charged. The next day, their girlfriends came to school and accused me of stealing their boyfriends. They dragged me into the bathroom and beat me to death. My mother, who had been living off my earnings, kicked me out of the house as soon as I was no longer useful. I wonder if anyone even bothered to bury me. I died a dirty, meaningless death. 3. Hurry up, will you? The photographer is getting impatient. There are plenty of others who would jump at the chance. If you don't want to do it, just get lost. Someone yelled from outside the dressing room. My mother flashed a fawning smile at the person. I grabbed the clothes she was holding, threw them to the ground, pushed her away, and ran out of the dressing room. I won't wear it. I won't wear it. If my classmates see me, they'll laugh at me. I shouted as I ran. That creepy guy touched me. I'm not going. The room was full of people, makeup artists, other models, and their parents. Everyone heard me. For the first time, I dared to defy my mother. She was furious. Grabbing the clothes, she pulled me to the ground by my hair and started beating me. She completely ignored the strange looks and the secretly raised phone cameras of the onlookers. You little bitch. I feed you. I clothe you. I stay up all night working for you. And now you dare to disobey me? She screamed. This beautiful body of yours is a gift from me, and you're supposed to use it to make me money. Get in there and put those clothes on. She dragged me back into the dressing room, my hair still in her grasp. I cried and struggled, but everyone just stood there and stared at my mother, pointing and whispering. Tears streamed down my face, making me look incredibly pitiful. But inside, I felt a sense of calm. Putting on that same outfit again wouldn't lead to the same outcome. I was dragged out of the dressing room, just as I had been dragged in. My clothes were so revealing that everyone who saw me shook their heads in disapproval. But my mother was blinded by greed. All she could see was the huge sum of money she was about to make. She completely ignored the strange looks from the people around her. All she cared about was getting me to the shoot. With tears streaming down my face and bruises forming on my body, I looked like a victim being forced into prostitution. I covered my chest and cried out for help. But everyone around me was just a cold spectator. They didn't care about me. Why would they? It didn't affect them. I expected this reaction. 4. Just like last time, the photos I took went viral as soon as they were released. The topic of child clothing sexualization became a hot search. A bunch of netizens started attacking me without even understanding the whole story. Those marketing accounts used one picture to spread rumors about me, and they trashed me relentlessly. Once again, I was at the center of a storm, but I wasn't worried. The more they insulted me, the more guilty they would feel when they discovered the truth, wouldn't they? Meanwhile, I was sleeping soundly at home, avoiding the online backlash. In my previous life, I had countless sleepless nights due to photo shoots and schoolwork. The constant stress had taken a toll on my skin, and I broke out in acne. And for someone who relied on their looks for a living, that was a disaster. My mother was so worried. She was afraid that I would lose my ability to make money for her. If she hadn't been so stingy, she would have taken me for expensive cosmetic procedures. In this new life, I just wanted to catch up on all the sleep I had lost. Suddenly, I heard footsteps and felt a tug on my hair. Still sleeping? My mother snapped. Don't you know you're in trouble? How can you sleep so soundly? She dragged me out of bed, just like countless other times. I cried and pretended to be hurt. Mom, please don't hit me. I'll go to work. I'll be very respectful to the photographer. Please forgive me. She enjoyed controlling me and was satisfied with my obedience. Look at you, so useless. Your acting career is probably over. I've lined up a few jobs for you. You better make the most of it before it's too late. After this incident, my reputation was ruined. No decent company would want to work with me. I had been through this before. The companies my mother introduced me to were all shady, and they wanted me to do even more explicit photos to capitalize on the scandal. If it hadn't been for the public outcry and government intervention, those companies would have continued to exploit me. My mother only cared about money, not my reputation. I pretended to be pitiful and obedient. Secretly, my eyes glanced at the keyhole of the dresser drawer. Mom, in your last life, you managed to stay clean while I was left to struggle in the mud. This time, it's your turn to feel the sting of public humiliation. 5. Before my mother could drag me to the next shoot, she found herself in a crisis. One of the staff members who had been there that day, wanting to get their 15 minutes of fame, released a video of my mother. The public was already very interested in this story, and the video went viral, garnering millions of views. The tide turned. I, who had been seen as an immoral little girl, was now portrayed as an innocent victim being exploited by her family. My mother was frantic. She had never been so anxious when I was being bullied online before. She only ever cared about herself. She started calling all the high-ranking people she knew, hoping they could help save her reputation. But why would they? They had no personal connection to us. With my current situation, they would probably be afraid of getting involved. I sat on the couch, eating chips, watching her pace back and forth in the living room. Besides sleeping, enjoying food was something I wanted to make up for in this life. To maintain my figure, I had barely eaten any real food in my previous life. Every day, I had only a bowl of what my mother called a nutritional meal, which was basically just grass. I didn't even know what cola or milk tea tasted like until I died. But my mother, when she was stressed, would always take it out on me, seeing me so relaxed. She slapped me. I didn't resist, just cried and begged for forgiveness, just like I had done before. Hit me. The harder you hit, the better the payoff will be. She slapped me again and again, leaving bruises on my face. When she was finally out of breath, she stopped. She took away my chips and went out to buy groceries. Don't you dare eat junk food ever again, she scolded. Look at your face. You've got pimples all over your forehead. It's all because of junk food. I'm going to make you a healthy meal, so you better stay here and behave. As soon as she left, I used a paperclip to remove the tiny camera from the keyhole. I opened my computer and played back the footage. Watching my mother's distorted face, I could already imagine the online comments. I quickly edited the clips into a video and uploaded it secretly. 6. In this age of the internet, news travels fast. My mother returned home empty-handed from her grocery shopping trip, with 2 rotten eggs on her head and vegetable leaves stuck to her clothes. Is this your doing? You little bitch. Did you secretly record me? She yelled. You've learned to be so deceitful. Yes, Mom. Didn't you teach me that? You said I shouldn't be a bookworm and should be more flexible. I'm just putting your teachings into practice. And look how well it's working. Why don't you compliment me? She was furious. I cowered in a corner, terrified of her. Over the past 2 years, she had taken many courses to improve her skills in front of the camera, so she could easily identify the angle from which I had filmed the video. With a few quick movements, she found the tiny camera hidden in the keyhole. You little ungrateful bitch. I've done so much for you, and this is how you repay me. She was out of control, hitting and kicking me. She even threw cups and lamps at me. It was the worst beating I had ever received. I lay on the floor, barely conscious. I thought about my father. He was always her punching bag, and she would beat him whenever they argued. My timid father couldn't do anything to stop her. I had witnessed their fights as a child and developed a deep-rooted fear of her. My father had divorced her and escaped, but I wasn't so lucky. After he left, I became her punching bag. Thankfully, I could still make money for her. Otherwise, I have no doubt she would have killed me. Having experienced bullying and death in my previous life, I knew how to protect myself. I was confident that she couldn't seriously hurt me. I glanced at the open computer on the desk. Mom, don't you pride yourself on your sensitivity to cameras? How could you not have noticed? I was live streaming. 7. The beating stopped when the police arrived. It was a kind netizen who had seen the live stream and called the police. As the police pulled her off me, she was still struggling and arguing. What are you doing? Can the police just barge into people's homes? She shouted. It's none of your business how I discipline my daughter. Let go of me. I'll sue you. You'll see. She was taken away and detained. I was sent to the hospital. After treatment and rest, I finally had time to open my phone and check the online comments. The public opinion had completely reversed. The people who had previously bullied me were now targeting my mother. In the eyes of the public, I had become a pitiful child who was being forced into prostitution. My mother was now bearing the shame that I had endured in my previous life. Although she wasn't sent to prison, she was detained. As a minor, I needed a guardian, so the police sent me to live with my father. Everyone looked at me with sympathy. The police officer patted my head and comforted me. Child, you'll be living with your father from now on. You won't have to suffer like that anymore, he said. Of course, I won't suffer anymore. I'll walk my own path. I'll do the work I want to do. I'm no longer a puppet controlled by others. 8. My mom was released from detention after 15 days. She looked pale and haggard, and her spirit was broken. She was a far cry from the arrogant woman she was before. Now she was infamous. The company had fired her. Her house was splattered with pig's blood, and the door was covered in malicious graffiti. Her former neighbors, whom she used to insult, were now emboldened and laughed at her dream of raising a star. She had single-handedly brought shame to the child modeling industry. Now, whenever people mentioned child models online, it had negative connotations. Child modeling agencies were keeping a low profile, and many child models couldn't get jobs or make money. She had truly angered everyone. Not only did outsiders despise her, but even people in the industry wanted her dead. She tried to contact her old connections, hoping to work as an agent or something to make a living. But people either hung up on her or yelled at her. Doesn't it feel bad to be cyberbullied? Mom, do you know what I went through in my last life? All the money I worked so hard to earn went straight into her pocket. Even now, she could live comfortably for a long time without working, relying on that money. But money is finite, and it will eventually run out. Now she's scrimping and saving, even breaking a bun in half to eat. She's lost 10 pounds from starvation. During my growth spurt, when I needed to eat well, she would restrict my food. When I was at my hungriest, I even fainted on set. She would splash water on me to wake me up and make me continue shooting. She always told me that I had to suffer when I was young, that it was for my own good, and that building a reputation wasn't for her benefit. This endless cycle of suffering turned me into skin and bones. The perfect on-screen look. She always had one weight standard for me, never considering my rapidly growing height. If she loved the white, young, and thin look so much, she could lose weight herself and become a model. Didn't she love taking me to those shoots? She always said she was doing it for my own good. So why didn't she go and do it herself? 9. I've been studying hard at my dad's place. Although my dad is a bit weak and was once manipulated and abused by my mom, he finally found the courage to divorce her. But he's also very kind and simple. He can't make a lot of money, but he's willing to give me the best things. He's a great cook. The first meal I had at his place, I devoured it. He was so touched and said he would cook for me every day and would do everything he could to make up for what I'd been through. I've been getting the best education, maybe out of sympathy. My classmates at school don't hold my past against me, and they even take good care of me because of it. My teachers also feel sorry for me and give me the best treatment, which is a kind of special care. I've slowly caught up on my studies and my grades have been improving. The day I got my college entrance exam results, my eyes were red. Everything was different from my last life. I finally escaped my miserable fate in my last life. My grades have always been good, but my mom never saw it. To her, I was just a tool, a way to make quick money. Things like studying were too much of an investment and took too long. She couldn't wait. Dad bought some groceries and cooked a big meal for me. We were going to celebrate at home. Unexpectedly, my mom, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, suddenly knocked on our door. I could hardly recognize her. Her hair was gray at the temples, and she had many more wrinkles around her eyes. She looked old and frail. Her eyes were dull, and she was wearing a mask, as if she was sick. Dad and I both instinctively took a step back, away from her. "What are you doing here?" I asked her with disgust. Now I didn't need to pretend anymore. She couldn't threaten me. She had become the weaker one, begging pitifully for our charity. It turned out that she had finally spent all the money she had squeezed out of me over the years. And she seemed to be sick, but she was hesitant to tell us, only hoping that Dad would give her some money for medical treatment out of old friendship. Dad hesitated, a little moved. It looked like he was going to give her the money. How could that be? That money was all earned by Dad with hard work. She had drained me dry, and now she wanted to harm my dad? I would never allow that to happen. I stopped Dad. She had exploited me for so long. I shouldn't even ask her to pay me back. Yet she wanted to get money from me? She was so shameless. Seeing her plan fail, she became furious. The tears that had been welling up in her eyes disappeared. She pointed her finger at my nose and called me an ungrateful daughter. Her eyes were full of hatred, as if she wanted to skin me alive. I felt a chill run down my spine and closed the door. Now I had a home, and I wasn't afraid of her. She lingered at the door, cursing. The soundproofing here wasn't good, and her loud voice and the explosive gossip attracted the neighbors. This world never lacked nosy people, but there were also people with bad tempers. It was getting late, and they were annoyed, so they called the security guard to drag her away. On the way, someone seemed to recognize her. A group of people rushed over and started taking pictures of her face. She hid, afraid of being found and attacked again with eggs. She had gotten herself into a bigger mess. After so many years, her name was once again trending. After all, there weren't many people who could be as persistent and shameless as she was in exploiting her daughter for so many years. I heard she had just interviewed for a cleaning job. This incident was brought up again, and she lost the job. Now she was really out of money. What would she do? Remembering her terrifying look that day, I felt a little uneasy. Even a rabbit will bite when cornered. Would she try to drag me down with her? But I was about to start school. The only thing I was worried about was my dad. 10. I moved into a dorm and started living a normal life. My mom doesn't know which university I got into. She never cared. The last time she came to find me, she was only interested in money. As time went by, I gradually forgot about the shadow my mom had cast over me. I thought she wouldn't find me again, but I never expected to see her this way. That day, while I was researching in the library, I accidentally clicked on a website and saw a nude photo of my mom. It reminded me of all the horrible things she had done to me. She had pushed me into the abyss and never cared about me. I felt angry and disgusted, but also grateful that I had escaped her clutches. 11. I went home for National Day. As a family person, I had to go see my dad. He's been unwell, coughing a lot during our video calls, and I was worried that my mom would continue to harass him. He's a meek man, and I was afraid she would bully him while I was away. Dragging my heavy luggage, I arrived at the apartment building. My right eyelid kept twitching, and I had a bad feeling, as if something bad was going to happen. As I walked into the dim hallway, I felt like I was being swallowed up. Suddenly, a flash of light caught my eye. An old woman with wrinkled face rushed out from the stairs, a knife in her hand, aimed straight at my heart. It was my mom. She seemed to have been waiting here for me, with a weapon ready. She didn't know I was coming back today, but she must have been waiting for me here every day. She looked desperate, and her strength was surprising. I was caught off guard, and I caught the knife with my bare hands. Blood was gushing out. I was terrified, but I cherished my life even more now. Just when I thought I was going to die in her hands again, my dad appeared and kicked her away. My once timid dad had bravely stood up to protect me. He was no longer weak. 12. I immediately called the police after I escaped. They arrived quickly, One of the officers recognized my mother and said she was a frequent visitor to the police station. My mom had been arrested multiple times for various crimes, including prostitution, robbery, and burglary. She would do anything to survive. I was so glad I had escaped her early, otherwise my life would have been ruined. This time, she committed attempted murder and was sentenced to death. My dad was furious and hired the best lawyer to ensure she got what she deserved. The day before my mom was executed, I went to see her one last time. She had gone mad and was cursing at me. Even though I had won a scholarship, she still thought I owed her. I told her I would burn paper money for her so she could rest in peace. My dad was waiting for me outside the prison. He looked stronger than before. He told me that he and my mom had nothing to do with each other anymore. 13. I felt a huge weight lifted off my shoulders after getting rid of that biggest trouble. In the following days, I studied hard and got into graduate school. Upon graduation, I went straight to work in a research institution. I devoted myself to researching new materials. I studied how to make clothes warmer in winter and cooler in summer. Clothes are not necessarily more attractive the more revealing they are. In ancient times, clothing was invented as a tool to keep warm. Although freedom of dress is advocated, we should not distort the meaning of freedom. My story caused a sensation back then and is still being talked about today. Sometimes my colleagues wonder why I chose this career. I would then tell them about my past, because I want to change the world's clothing system and ensure that my future generations will never have to go through what I did.